For this module, we're going to talk through how to take evaluation questions and think about evidence that will answer those questions and methods that will allow you to answer those evaluation questions. So thinking about gathering evidence, I've posted a matrix that you will work through for your final and for the project for this module, and this just explains that matrix. So this is the matrix. I'm going to talk through each part of the matrix. So beginning with evaluation questions, you've already come up with those questions, but as a set, just as a reminder, those questions should together address the purpose of the evaluation. So for the information source, each question will require the collection of information or evidence on at least one variable. And when you think about information source, think about what individuals, what documents, what existing data sources, maybe what activities hold the answer to each question. Specific individuals might be the participants in your program, people who are associated with the participants like parents, spouses, partners, people who are affected by the program like the general public or future participants, program deliverers, subject area experts, policymakers, program officials, or there could be somebody else based on your program. Existing data might include institutional data, it might include sign-in sheets, website analytics. There are all kinds of things that could be existing data that you could go back and look at. And then documents might be training materials, syllabi, promotional materials, files, websites, public documents such as written reports and policies, and other. And then also consider program activities or events that could be observed. So then moving on to the data collection method, think about how you will gather the information from that information source. So what tool will you use to extract information? This might be done through observations. It could be done with case studies, focus groups, interviews, questionnaires, assessments. There are lots of ways that you can get the data, gather the data from the sources. If you need to collect data using an instrument like a test or an observation protocol or a questionnaire, think about what will you use, and that's what you would put in this column typically. If you don't have an existing instrument for your study right now, then do not worry about creating one. Just say I would collect with a survey. If it does exist and you have evidence to show that the instrument would be valid or reliable in this context, then you would need to provide that. You would definitely need to provide that if you are doing this in a real setting. But for this course, because this course is not focused on instrument development and validity and reliability, that's kind of beyond the scope of this course. And we do have courses that would teach you that. But it is important, just not required for this assignment. Next, we move on to the design column. For this class, this is going to be high level, so you're not having to think really deeply if you don't have a lot of background in research design. But do think about the design that's most relevant to the question. In general, are you going to be thinking about answering the question descriptively, or are you going to try to make causal claims or correlational claims about the program? This is where research methods expertise is critical, and this is also beyond the scope of this course. But I do want you to at least think through, is this something that's experimental, non-experimental? Is it quasi-experimental, for example? It is also very helpful to build a team of experts who have research design in different areas. Many times your questions are going to span different types of data and different methods. And so I found that it's very helpful to pull in people who have expertise in different areas. Again, for this course, you can be really general, but in general, for the design, non-experimental designs might include a time series design. So you might be doing observations throughout or interviews throughout your project where it's not experimental, but you're just talking to people in the group and what's your experience over time with this program. You might do a cross-sectional design where you're just jumping in and looking at a group at the beginning and finding out how they are feeling about a program, or you might just at the end get some feedback from stakeholders about the program, or you might do a descriptive case study. I have listed studies within this PowerPoint, and these are all posted within the module. Causal type designs, in general, if you're going to make causal kinds of claims to say this program has this level of impact, then your design will probably be an experimental or a quasi-experimental study. The difference between the two is that experimental studies are random. You have random selection of participants. Randomized control trials is what you'll hear. These could be pre-post designs where you give an assessment or a survey or whatever, two data points at the beginning and at the end. You might do post and retrospective pre, where you at the end ask the participants to reflect on where they were previously. And then you could do a post only, so just that snapshot for the experimental design. But again, you'd have two groups, and people are randomly assigned to those two groups. With quasi-experimental, there's not the random assignment, but quasi-experimental design looks a lot like experimental design otherwise. However, you do have to analyze the data differently. And if you don't have a background in this, you can take coursework at UK in quasi-experimental design, and I would encourage you to do that. And I've also posted some readings on quasi-experimental design, again from the Posovac book. A couple of quasi-experimental designs include the interrupted time series, where you might look at data over time. So if you have multiple time points and then something happens, for example, if a policy is implemented or a law is passed, you can look at the trend of data and then what happens when, for all of the people before the implementation of the policy or the law, and then after. So that would be an interrupted time series design, for example. And then a comparison group design where participants are matched with a comparison group, and then to see what the effect is of a program. Many evaluations do use several methods to address different questions, so there are mixed methods kinds of evaluations, and I've posted a piece on how you might think through a mixed methods evaluation. And then they may just address the same question in different ways. And in evaluation, we call that triangulation. This isn't required for this course, but you may include a lot of other things in this matrix. For example, you might also include information collection procedures, so data collection procedures. Who would be collecting the data that needs to be collected? When will data be collected? How many time points? At what point in the development of the program or the rollout of the program? What might sampling look like? Quite often in evaluations, your population is very small, and so there's no need to sample. But if you have a very large study and with maybe a large existing data set, it may be important to sample. And again, that's outside the scope of this course, but it would be important to use the sampling procedures that you would use in any research method setting. Analysis procedures would also be included, and then information on reporting. And so thinking about who is going to receive the reports, how will you be providing information to the different recipients of reporting, and then when, how often would that happen? And then all of this information would go to shareholders, important people that are decision makers. It is very important to think through each of these areas before you begin the evaluation. So this is all the design phase. This would typically be the kind of information that you include in a grant proposal, for example, or if you were working with a funding group, they would likely want to see each of these different aspects of the evaluation. But it's also very important as an evaluator to think through these things before you ever get into the evaluation. It helps to define the different roles, to lay out the plans, knowing that things may change. The reality is programs change, programs evolve, and an evaluation may need to be responsive to that. But beginning the evaluation with a solid plan will help frame in the future how the evaluation will roll out, and it also helps to make sure that the scope of the evaluation doesn't kind of creep. That's something that you have to watch as an evaluator, of people kind of changing directions or wanting more information that may be outside the budget, and a plan like this just kind of helps mitigate that sort of issue. If you have questions, do be sure to jump on to online office hours this week, or reach out and we can schedule a time to meet together to work through the methods matrix.